Welcome to Funny Minds, and I'm your host, Lynn B., and I have my co-host to my right, Edward Biss, and
howdy. Let's do it.
He's going to introduce our guest for today. This is his second podcast with us, so we're very excited to have him back. And who is he, Eddie?
Yeah, we're going part 2 of our podcast today. We did just shot part 1 with Mr. Mike Bosworth today. Mike is a very special guest to the show because of many reasons, one of which we are in his studio.
And we thank him immensely.
So they would do what they're told.
Yes.
No, they do what I tell them to do.
That's true. I've never had a second date before, so I don't know how to act.
Mike, if he gets frustrated, he will stab me in the butt with a fondue fork, but that's just, I don't fault him. That's just what he's into. But Mr. Fondue. Mike Bosworth is a musician, a writer. He's had a successful podcast. He is a professional in the world of forensics and crash reconstruction and lots of good testifying and, who's at fault because someone's head popped off and, how fast was the car going in order for the head to pop off. That's interesting stuff. And he does a lot of...
And he was originally an EMT, so that's what started him.
Yeah, so round 2 with Mr. Bosworth today, we're going to dive into some of his professional endeavors leading up to where he is today.
Okay, it's all you.
Ask away.
All you, Mike.
Oh, I'm not just running a narrative. Ask me a question.
Okay, so you started as an EMT where? Here in Florida?
In Brevard County, so when I was still in school. They were looking for volunteers. Some of the classes that I was in, it was required, or not required, but it would help you. So I think it was like a college success skills course or something like that, that if you, through one of these programs, if you were to volunteer through one of these programs, it would be extra credit. And back when I was in school, I kind of took the position that there was no such thing as extra credit. So I went on ahead and did it as though it were required. And I do apologize, having a little trouble speaking. But the
do you want to
water? Do you want a dick?
Why are these here?
To entice people.
People who
there we go. There we go, James.
Oh, we got some water for you.
You're the best studio engineer. Thank you.
If he was the best, he would have came in with like a 100-year-old scotch for you. But then you would have started getting, playing banjo.
He was playing Deliverance music earlier. I was already getting worried.
On the dobro out there.
Yes.
It was awesome. So where in school, where in Brevard did you go to school?
I went to Brevard Community College. I believe it's called Eastern College now. But at that time, I kind of started school late. I was 26 years old. I got sick of working in construction, and it wasn't necessarily that the money was bad, but it kind of ebbed and flowed. So I wanted to get something that was a little bit more consistent, and I went in on a 2+2. So my degrees, both my bachelor's and master's, both are from the University of Florida, but Florida, a lot of people know this. Yeah, Gator. So I'm a Gator.
Awesome.
But essentially, if you finish a 2-year program in Florida, you're assured of not necessarily the school you want, but you're assured to get into a Florida university. And so I tried to squeeze my way in, and fortunately they accepted me. It was the first school that I applied for, and I got accepted. So, but anyhow, went and got all the training. So we did BLS, which is basic life support, advanced life support. Packaging is what they call it, how you transport people. Well, now if they were obviously dead, now that's a story if you want to talk about that.
I can't wait to get to those.
So do you want me to go to that?
Well, and you're dealing with, my mother was a LPN at one point.
Yes, I first started out going to nursing school, yes, and worked in a hospital and decided this is not for me and went back to college.
I decided it was not for me either. Mm-hmm. It was, I had a really nasty MVA on I-95, and it completely took it out of me.
Really?
So, yes, even though years later, this would be part of what I do. I've kind of had to get adjusted to it. But we had actually picked up people, usually embarrassed because they were having some kind of panic attack or something like that. And then we took them to the hospital, and it was essentially a panic attack. Just people really stressed out and wound up. The first time that it wasn't my first MVA, but that level of MVA, I had a panic attack. So I had a sense of what that actually meant because I could not breathe. I could not orient myself. My paramedic realized that something was wrong with me. And so she's like, well, just go ahead and just go out and keep people away from the scene. And then she came back over and she's like, are you okay? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. What's wrong with me? She's like, why don't you get in the ambulance? And so I went and got inside, and then everything happened, which I felt really bad because everybody's having to do the work. And I was supposed to be there, but I just couldn't get my bearings. It was weird.
Right.
But the people that were involved, well, it was one person actually. It was very obvious she was not going to make it. And so so we didn't have to transport her, which is good. And they called another company called Coastal. And Coastal are some of the most interesting people I've ever met. They kind of do all the cleanup. They kind of exist doing the things that nobody wants to do.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
But they love their job. And so talking to these guys, you're just like, wow, because they tell their stories. And
and they have some great stories.
Yeah. Well, they were telling me, I'm like sitting here mildly horrified, and they're talking about somebody that was electrocuted, and as they were trying to slide him into the bag, the skin kept coming off. I'm like, and they're laughing, and they're just absolutely loving it. And
hey, listen, it's got to take a special breed.
That's how we were in nursing school. We'd go to a diner, and we'd be talking about all these horrific things, not even paying attention to the fact that people were starting to leave their seats because we're not even thinking. Like, to us, this was normal. Yeah. But to other people, it's not normal. No. No.
Especially when you're eating.
Well, especially when
yeah, that's
disco fries. Don't mess with my disco fries. But that's, if anything's going to do it to you, and panic attacks are no joke. Obviously, I've had them. They are no joke until you have one because you think you're having a heart attack. But I was convinced I was having a heart attack. Like, I was just like, that's it. This is it.
But it's better that you found out early, that you couldn't deal with this.
It's such a weird life. I mean, like, everybody involved, like, we would get an accident. So if somebody gets hit by a car and they end up with a femur break, which is kind of an unusual break, and they would put them in a hair traction splint. And so these people would be in miserable pain. It was obvious, just screaming, upset. And they put them in the hair traction splint, and you tighten it up. And what it does, it pulls the bone. Mm-hmm. And then you can overlap them to basically put them where they're supposed to be as you transport them. And the level of relief just immediately, like, this is the greatest thing in the world. So that was something I learned. But the reason I bring it up is, like, surgeons and stuff, they would tell stories like somebody's missing this section. They're having to put the femur back together. And so they would position the leg in unusual just because they thought it was funny. Yeah. It's like, throw his leg over his chest while you're waiting to get
People really should not know what goes on in the operating
room. They should not know what's going on.
Or they'll never want to be operated on.
Another one, I'm sitting there, and the paramedics and the police are all together, and they're reading the suicide note from this guy. And well, he's not dead. He took a bunch of drugs, and because I spoke to the doctor. The doctor said, I said he's going to make it, and he's like, maybe 50-50. He goes, but usually they'll find a way to make it work. And it was like the saddest thing, but the suicide note, so he's reading it and he's like apologizing to his mom and everything. But he was talking about his cat. So the biggest deal that was going on in his life was his cat, and that whoever had to take care of the cat, and there was this whole list of instructions, and he was making such a fuss, it was funny. And so they were laughing, and I'm sitting there horrified, and the paramedic goes, he's watching me. He's this... what's this barbershop singer? So he's one of like four people.
Quartet.
A barbershop quartet.
Yeah, and he was really, really good, really cool guy. Yes, thank you. But he saw what was going on with me, and he just really quickly is like, look, dude, if you take this stuff serious at all, it'll burn you up. And he's like, and I'm like, okay, so, and that actually helped to kind of realize you need to keep a level of separation from reality and what it is that you're dealing with, or I guess what you're dealing with in the moment and how it can possibly affect you. So you try to create that separation between the way that it would normally affect anyways. But
well, you can't sympathize, you have to empathize.
Yeah.
You know, and just be totally outside of yourself. And, you know, people don't get the correlation between that. But you have to. If you're going to stay in that type of career, nurses, doctors, aides, EMTs, lab assistants, whoever you're going to be in the medical profession, you've got to just remove yourself from all of that.
And seriously, bless these people. It's like,
This
is going to be the most depressing episode you guys have ever made. So,
no,
but interesting.
No,
welcome to the darkness.
It's very interesting. So you went from an EMT, and how long were you in EMT?
Less than a year.
Okay.
But I just want to say something about what you were just talking about. My middle daughter, she had a friend.
Okay.
And he was in a children's hospital, and she's like, "Can I go visit them?" I was like, "Sure." So I take her there, and she brings her video game system. It's like a PS3, whatever, and there so that they can play video games. So she's like, "Okay, you can leave now." And I'm like, "Well, you're like whatever, 12, 13 years old. I can't just leave somebody else, responsible for you."
Right.
So the nurse comes in. I'm like, "Hey, is it okay if she stays here?" And her reaction was so funny. She's looking around. "You mean you want a child to stay here?" It's like, She's like, "No, it's perfectly fine." So I left her there. When I came back, the kid's mom was there. Anyways, it's they're talking about some procedure he's got to get done, and he's like, "Yeah, that should give us a little bit more time." And I was like, "A little bit more time for what?" And he's like, And I'm like, and I look over at his mom and I said, "Is he like really, really sick?" She's like, "Yeah." She goes, "We should get 6 months or whatever." And I'm like, "Ooh, wow." The kind of the realization, like whatever I was complaining about before, meant absolutely nothing. But I realized one thing: the nurses, like the people you're talking about, the medical staff, they deal with all of that, and they get to know these people. And like I've met people that are like, "Oh, well, my dad's sick; he's in the hospital," but I don't remember him that way. I want to remember him when he was alive and he was full of energy. But the problem is, if you don't have the courage to visit somebody and be there for them when they're, pretty much days away from checking out, then they die alone. And it's
virtually, yes.
And so these nurses that stay with these children, even though it's going to rip their heart out, I mean, guaranteed, but they do what they have to do. That is a kind of strength that I don't even understand.
It's beyond conception for a lot of people. Yeah.
So
because most people don't even want to give you the right time of day, let alone, stay. Well, how many people would you know is going to come upon an accident and hold somebody's hand knowing that they're going to die? No, you're going to take off of the hills. You're not going to worry about your fellow man, and most people don't do that.
Most, but I do have several, I've done probably over 1,000 car crashes.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, it's exactly what you just said. There's somebody that'll just hang out with them until they're gone so they don't die alone.
I would do that. Yeah. I mean, one time I stopped in the middle of the street because this poor lady, she had a cane. She wasn't that old, but she was having trouble trying to get off the curb to step down. I guess she was afraid she was going to fall. So I just stopped in the middle of the street. I said to my daughter, "Get out of the car and go help that lady across the street, and I'll pull over to the side." Because everybody's going by, everybody's watching her. Nobody would stop and help this poor woman, which is terrible. I mean, and we as human beings should really worry about helping our fellow man. That's what it's all about,
Yep, that's the Boy Scout thing there.
Yeah. They deserve a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
And especially during COVID, my God. I mean, the medical profession really went above and beyond.
Especially when you don't, you're getting tossed into something, you really kind of clueless. It's just like, get there, deal with it. We'll figure out the rest later. It's kind of a tough position to be in, especially when you're putting yourself in harm's way, because no one knew really totally much.
What it was really going to be like.
I mean, you never know. I mean, it could have wiped out a good portion of your medical establishment if it was something like that, But still, they did it, just like the firemen and cops and everybody that runs into buildings and all that,
Yeah.
They call it heroic. That's an understatement. I mean, you're giving your life, so it's crazy.
So you spent a year, and from there you went on to learn how to do this forensic work?
Oh, well, the two are actually completely unrelated. So
Oh, okay.
I, um, a guy named Dr. Eric Carey, one of the very, very brilliant, he's a professor at the University of Florida, very brilliant engineer. Um, I believe, and I may not have this correct, but he was one of the design engineers for fuel induction into the Pratt & Whitney F-22 Raptor motors.
Oh,
Anyways,
Whitney.
yeah.
We made pieces for them.
Oh, there you go.
My company. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's right, TechCast.
That's right.
Um,
I thought you were joking.
No.
See, they're smarter than you gave her credit for.
I know.
Okay.
So he had recommended me because I did really well in school. So even though I was, yeah,
Lied
so,
to me.
but I finished like in the top 2%. Sorry, I can't speak though.
There you go.
Of ABET accredited engineers, and then and then became an inductee into the Order of the Engineer. All this other crap. But anyway,
all right.
well, the thing is when you look at me, I don't look like a typical high functioning, in that. Anyways,
You look like a murderous Lane Staley.
exactly, and that's what I was shooting for. But I got a lot of great opportunity from the people that. So, it's like judging a book by its cover, right? Like
Right.
when you first get connected with somebody, and they may, whatever, wrinkle their nose at you or whatever, and then you have to kind of win them over. But all my professors were won over. We're in the classroom and we're doing the interaction and answering questions, and they see the performance on my on schoolwork and stuff like that. And I don't mean to. I'm not bragging at all. Maybe, well, I guess I am. But the point is that the professors would go out of their way to create opportunities for me, and this happened twice, which is what led me to the field that I'm working at now. The first one was Dr. Eric Carey. He had recommended me for FSRI, which is a Florida Space Research Institute in Brevard County at NASA. At that time, it was being changed to Spaceport, Florida. And these are the years before Elon Musk. Anyways, went and worked there, worked at NASA, had access to everything. I could walk around
That's gotta be cool as hell.
Yeah, down at the launch ports and then the space station itself. They had the sticky floor when you walked in to pull dust off your feet, and you could touch those and meet people from all over the world and that sort of thing.
That's gotta be cool.
Yeah, no, that was cool. Yep, I did that.
I mean, very few people ever get to see anything like that.
Right.
Well, the people, like if you were a visitor to NASA, they had a hallway and it had blast-proof glass, and you would look through a window, maybe about 6 inches tall, and you could look at everything that I was seeing being inside the room back then. But and then I was an instructor at the University of Florida. I did 3D drafting, so I go back there after NASA, and another professor, his name was Gary Matthews. They needed a recommendation for somebody to do a graphic. It was actually a video, so an animation for a murder case that was on court TV. And I didn't know anything about any of this, but he's like, Dr. Matthews was called by a previous professor at the University of Florida and said, hey, I need the best animator you have. Nowadays, there's great animation software. But back then, this was around 2001, there really wasn't, at least not accessible to the everyday guy. And so I created a 3D model of the scene, and then basically took frames from the 3D model and strung them together at 15 frames per second, created this animation. It worked really well, but it was weird because I saw, so the animation came off of my computer. I actually used my cousin's computer because it was much higher powered than the one that I had. And then I'm looking at it, a half hour later, and it's on television. Well, when that was done, the person that had hired me on that to do that project said, hey, you are like really good at this. Would you like to continue doing this? And he's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm teaching at the University of Florida. He's like, how much they pay you? It's like $15 an hour. He's like, I'll give you $64 if you leave today.
Wow.
So I called Dr. Matt, which I'd never heard of 64 an hour. Never.
Never. Love you.
Which I wouldn't even work at all for that price now, which is what's funny. But at the time, that was... So I went and talked to my professor, Dr. Matthew, who he was my boss for the teaching gig. And I said... I told him what was going on and, the pay raise and what I was going to be doing.
And he's like, are they hiring?
And he goes...
Can I get in
exactly.
on this gig?
He said, he goes, I really hate to lose you and I'm going to be very disappointed and upset. He goes, but I know what I would do. And it was kind of like, it was interesting. He was still teaching. He's like, look, you have a better opportunity. Yeah, it's going to cause me trouble. It's going to cause me problems. I'm going to have to find somebody. I'm going to have to fill in for you while you're gone. But I know what I would do. So he's saying, you can either sit here and hang with me or show a little bit of courage and improve your situation in life.
Absolutely.
That was a good lesson.
It's like deal or no deal. He's like, deal. Yep.
Yeah.
Ding, ding,
Deal.
ding, 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 ding. Have a career. Have your own career.
So everybody's left now. They're sick of the boring Mike story. So
all right. So you started doing this, and on an average, how often do you have to go? What do you do? Like piece together something after the fact, or they call you when the accident actually happens?
Well, I have that has actually happened before. So I've kind of bifurcated my life into product and premises liability or car crash reconstruction. The first few years that I did car crash reconstruction, I got one, and I don't want to mention it.
Okay, that's fine.
But I got one. It was a young girl. She had gone to see the movie Ocean's 11 and went there with her friends. She gets stopped. The cops are trying to. There's a police chase. Police officers on one road. He puts down stop sticks, tells her to stop next to the stop sticks. I guess I don't really know what the motive was to have her stop in the middle of the road, but the point is that car that they were chasing did end up behind her and destroyed her car. And it was smashed all the way up to the back seat, and it killed her, like right on the spot. But her father, well, like I said, I won't say names, but you can look up pursuitwatch.org. So he started this whole organization about. He makes very clear it wasn't anti-police, but it was basically we need to improve how we do police pursuits because there's way too many innocent people getting hurt and killed, including her. Totally. Including her. And he was so distraught that he himself would be gone within a year.
Aww.
He couldn't. The heartbreak was just too big.
Too massive for him.
It was, and so I'm sitting here reading about him talking about his kid, and he calls her Rue, and she's like the Winnie the Pooh character, and he is just absolutely, obviously in love with his daughter, like any father would be. But you could see they had a really close and special relationship with one another, and as I'm going through the file, I see all that stuff there, and then I see her autopsy photos, and I started freaking. And I would not take another car crash case for 3 years. And so all I did was, it was very similar to the MVA I had on the freeway.
I would have to say it's almost like PTSD.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
On a level.
And so I started doing just construction. So I became a certified structural masonry inspector, did nothing but structural work, and it would take me about 3 years, maybe 4 years before I entered in with another company. I explained to them the problems that I had in the past and that, I'm going to try to, because I think I was doing really well with forensic type work, and I had the idea that I could help people. And so I kind of...
So is that kind of also a motive for the parlay over to it, was the actual being on that one end of helping people now to another end of helping people in a different way? Was that part of a motivation to you? That attracted you to that aspect of the business, or was it purely just because you had the engineering background with the recreating in 3D images and being able to do that aspect, or was it all just one big giant ball of this works for me?
Oh, I would say both. I would say the aspect of the idea of having the courage to do what needs to be done. Like we were talking about the nurses earlier, that was part of it. And my sister, she's a RN or nurse practitioner or something like that, but she went to college for quite a while to be a nurse. I don't know what she is exactly. But the point is that it's exactly that type of thing, that if you want to be the person who's involved, who's actually affecting things, you have to have a little bit of courage. And so it's kind of a process. Like when you're looking at when I went to school initially for mechanical engineering, I was looking at companies in Brevard County because that's where I'm from, and most of those are either space related or weapons design.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it was good that I didn't go.
Both of which are cool, by the way.
Yeah.
I'll say that for another show, but that's cool. But I understand. I mean, obviously, that's what's down here.
So what you're doing is piecing together what actually happened. You don't have to go to the real scene anymore, but you're working off of schematics, like or the information that they're giving you, and you're piecing it together.
It's just a combination.
That's correct. So it's kind of the application of physics. So there's several different modalities of approaches within the crash reconstruction that are applicable to other disciplines for sure, but that they've been kind of built around the different types of analysis that you would need that's common to crash reconstruction. And so what I do now is basically from beginning to end. It depends on what evidence is available and the way that you approach the problem each time. But it's photographs, going out to the scene, pulling the scene geometry, documenting the evidence on the ground, scrape marks, tire marks, that sort of thing.
So it's physical, it's aerodynamics, it's everything.
Not much aerodynamics.
Not with cars,
no. No. By the time the crash has already occurred, I would say that aerodynamics itself does not apply as much as
I think it's just the overall physics of it all.
It is the physics, correct?
Okay.
Speed, distance, angles.
Yeah, and we've done, and you also do a thing called it's like occupant kinematics, or the way that vehicles and occupants or pedestrians interact with one another, and that has actually translated into a couple murder cases, including one, some pretty popular one up in Georgia. So.
Wow. Yeah. And then you have to testify to your...
And then you go to court and testify.
Okay. To everything that you've put together, all your schematics, and what you feel that, or what you see as how this whole thing happened.
Well, it's not necessarily, it is how I see it happen, but it's more than that. It's not like, well, I've looked at this, and in my opinion, it's more based on fact. Well, it's based on actual evidence and then actual physics, like laws of momentum and things like that. Okay. So it's more compelling than just, it should be more compelling to the jury or the judge than just this is what I think, right.
Like an expert witness, without actually examining something, just giving...
Do you ever, and I know we got to stop soon in a minute or so, but I just want to know, do you ever get called in as like a kind of a witness where you haven't seen anything, and they'll say to you, well, in your opinion, could this have happened? Like, we're going to show you everything. Do you think this could have happened? Like,
Yes. To answer your question, yes, that would be an unusual question to say, do you think this could have happened? That's the kind of the realm of speculation. So there's a lot of things that could have happened. The threshold for in a civil engineering case, obviously it's different for a criminal case, is you've heard Judge Wapner, a preponderance of the evidence. So preponderance of the evidence is greater than 50%. Okay. So if we have if there's a case theory, then I can look at the evidence and I can do the applied physics and all that sort of thing. And we look at that, and it's clear that we've gone beyond the 50% threshold. Then we've proven our case.
Okay, all right.
Now, do you also have you throughout this time doing it gained a reputation amongst the legal community as far as solid case, success rate, success testifying? Like, did they look at you as like, this is kind of the go-to for this type of thing? Like, have you created that type of reputation in this field?
I've had attorneys ask me that before. As far as my success rate, how many cases have you won? Well, first of all, I don't win any cases. I present an opinion. I will not take a case in which they tell me what to do, and I don't provide them that type of information. I'm not going to pimp myself based on my reputation. But I do know from a couple of attorneys that my reputation in a general sense is as a straight shooter.
Okay.
So.
Well,
awesome.
Unfortunately,
I could I could listen to this all day long.
Yeah, there's a lot more that I
hope
would
they
like
can,
to understand. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, if they want to learn something.
I thought it was extremely interesting.
You can only talk about dicks for so long. And you have to talk about dead bodies.
I think what you do is
told you it's going to be the most depressing story. Sorry,
I don't think it was depressing at all.
I love it.
I think it was very, very informative, and I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed having you on. And again, I thank you for allowing us to be in this space. And I'm going to say to my giggle bits out there, because that's what I call everybody, that we're so thrilled to have you. We're thrilled to have the guests that have come on our show so far, and hopefully we have a lot more interesting guests for you to watch and listen to. And don't forget our donated organizations, or to make donations to the organizations that we're talking about here, which is breast cancer and St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Give us a thumbs up, donate. You'll see on our website, funnyminds.com or funnyminds.podbean.com. You'll see what we're doing, who's going to be on future shows, and we're just looking to do a lot of fun things in the future. So thank you very much for being with us today. And
how do we find Mike? Where are you at?
Oh yes,
I'm
Mike.
on Bush Boulevard. My company's Exigent Engineering, so.
Okay.
EESRF.com if you want to look it up.
And the musical project is?
Gen Existential, Shadow of the Valley, and hopefully that's out before Halloween. So,
okay.
But I appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, and keep in mind this is a part 2. So part 1, see that as well. All these shows segments will be archived. So thank you so much for joining us, Mike Bosworth.
You're welcome.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.